All right, so not top 10, top 11 mistakes using the Regal Octopus Protein Skimmer. You're gonna learn all of our mistakes so you don't have to have them yourself. All right, so starting with number 1, they look kind of similar, and it's really hard to tell from like product pages what's the difference. So
don't make the mistake of not understanding what the difference between the Regal series, the red ones, and the Elite series, the white ones, because it's more than just color.
Yeah, so there's pretty much 3 things there. So 1, they're prettier, right?
Yeah,
they're like have a fancier mold to them. They also are more expensive. And third, there's actually like some differences in performance as well. One of which is many of the space-saving models have the pump actually inverted, which allows it to use the entire body, filled with bubbles, which increases contact time. So there's performance elements in there. So a little bit of performance and a whole lot of looks and a little bit of a bigger price tag, but that's about it. Because a lot of them, they're using the same pumps, it's just an acrylic tube, and you can decide for yourself if those things are of value. All right, so number 2, this is gonna become a big surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, the mistake here is just running your pump at max. So there's 5 speed settings on this thing, plugging it in and setting it to max, and then adjusting the gate valve to raise the water level. There's a lot more you're going to be doing to improve the performance other than just the gate valve.
Yeah, so here's the thing, is if you watch a lot of Randy's videos, you'll see that just running the more air is not more better. And so think of it like that combustion engine where there's a right mix of fuel, which in this case is fish turds and food, to the amount of air so that you can create a sustainable bubble that doesn't just burst immediately. That's actually one of the biggest problems that you can see with today's skimmers, because there's so much air nowadays, is that you just create this like rolling, boiling amount of bubbles that doesn't actually produce any foam that flows over the edge. When you decrease the amount of air to match the amount of organics in the water, all of a sudden that stable foam head starts to build. So one of the values here with the DC pump is the ability to scale the air and up and down with the amount of organics that are in the tank. So don't just run it at max and assume that that's best. Number 3, this goes against years and years of what we've been told. I've changed my own position on it, and I'm pretty firm now.
Yeah, and the mistake here is just assuming that bigger is better. If you look at the size of this neck and what it would take to get bubbles to foam fractionate up over the top, actually, in a lot of cases, smaller or medium size is better.
Yeah, so bigger means there needs to be a ton of organics for this giant skimmer to actually produce enough foam to flow over the edges.
Yeah.
So if I only have a handful of fish and a little bit of food, then a smaller skimmer with a tiny little neck will actually produce that foam a lot better. So I'm just gonna say it, I say this a lot and I really believe it at this point, which is if you go too big, you can actually get nothing. Going too little will actually work. You may not get all the benefits you can possibly get, but actually too little is better than too big. The right size is actually the right option, but one of the things that you get out of these DC pumps is the ability to actually scale up and down at the same time. Number 4, I don't know why anybody wouldn't do this, but you should.
Yeah, so the Regal series comes with the float. Even the Elite series comes with the float in the skimmer cup. The mistake is not using it. It's included. It's one feature that a lot of reefers struggle with, overflowing or overfilling their cup. And then it just goes into the tank. This just solves it out of the box because they included a float for the cup.
Yeah, so that is a really, really solid option, is the fact that it just stops, So if it gets full, it's not spraying all over the place. If your sump gets, like the return pump fails and the sump and the water level goes way up and it's not just spraying all over the place. So that when it's full, it just turns off. So they give you this float switch, use it. Number 5, think about the space and understand the differences in the models.
Yeah, and the mistake is not planning for that space. Some of the space-saving models you can plan for a little easier because the base of the footprint, is listed in the description and whatnot. You can use that, but we also account for the space of the pump on the side of the body. So these INT versions of the Regals, they have that Varios pump on the side of the body. It adds quite a bit, to the footprint of the thing, and you just have to be cognizant of it.
So know that going into it, and there's one piece here, you might not be real self-evident, because most people will say, well, I just like it to be smaller. Well, why would I not put the pump inside? And so the big difference here is the external ones will tend to fill the entire body up with bubbles, which increases contact time, which increases performance in most cases. And you know, the trade-off there is that it's a larger footprint in your sump. However, if you move the pump inside, generally you start to only use half of the total length of the, or height of the skimmer body. So know what you're doing in each case. You're sacrificing space for performance in one way or the other, giving up one preference for the other one. So make that a decision informed for your specific sump and application. All right, number 6 here is there's recommendations, and you should follow them.
Yeah, the recommendations for the depth that the water level, or the water level in your sump that the skimmers sit in, don't make the mistakes of overlooking them. Go look at the description, look at what this says in the box for your specific skimmer. A lot of times for the Reef Octopus Regals, it's 7 to 8 inches, which is a really tight window, or 8 to 10 inches, which again is a really tight window. So that means 6 inches, not gonna work good for you. 10 inches or 11 inches, probably also not gonna work the best for you. And we actually proved that in some of our skimmer test videos.
Yeah, so we saw that in a lot of them. So there's a reason that they give you that range. It's because the skimmer is actually designed to work with that amount of back pressure or head pressure from the water level in the sump. So if you're way outside of their range and it's not working, like you should actually consider getting it down. So one of the things that you'll probably see is if it's too low, there's a lot of head pressure to fill the entire skimmer up, and you won't see a lot of bubbles or performance. If it's too high, they'll end up with like too many bubbles and the thing is constantly overflowing. So get it inside the range and you'll get the best results. All right, so number 7, you want to kind of eliminate the water height component from the equation. There's a way to do it.
Yeah, don't make the mistake of overlooking the Regal series recirculating skimmers. This is another one where we tested in our Skimmer Investigates, and these recirculating skimmers take that out of the equation. Now there's 2 feed pumps, so there is that other mistake we talked about, you know, for the space and thinking about the space. You will have more space, but you'll probably have better, more refined performance.
Now, recirculating skimmers aren't the most popular these days, partially because you have to have 2 pumps and partially because they take up more space. But there are advantages. You can see that actually in one of the WWC videos where we put the recirculating skimmer on the 750. However, what you're going to get out of it is now I can control the amount of air going in it. I can also control the amount of organics being fed to it and at which rate, as well as the amount of contact time by controlling it. So if you have the space, this is really the ultimate solution. Tricks out the whole water height equation for the most part and gives me control over the fuel and the air to produce the desired result. All right, number 8, you can connect this thing to 0 to 10 volt, but why?
Yeah, so the mistake is overlooking that 0 to 10 volt control. There's only 5 speed buttons on the control box out of the box, but when you hook it up to a controller or a 0 to 10 volt control, you can now go from like 0 to 100% and most places in between.
Yeah, so you get a lot more settings and just a couple other options. If you already have the 0 to 10 ports on maybe your controller, go ahead and use it. Number 9, once you realize it's there, you probably will start using it.
Yeah, don't overlook the feed modes. There's a 5-minute, there's a 60-minute feed mode on these controllers. 5 minutes I could see just like I'm feeding the tank. Maybe I'd put aminos or something in there. 60-minute, I'm probably doing a water change.
Yeah, that's the big thing here is when you're doing maintenance on the tank, the sump level rises and then the skimmer tends to go crazy. So if you remember and you go ahead and use the 60-minute feed mode before you do that maintenance, well, now you got a whole bunch of time. The skimmer just turns off and an hour later it'll turn back on and it won't go totally nuts in your tank. Number 10, not enough people actually use this function.
Yeah, a lot of skimmers, you'll see this little drain port here, so don't make the mistake of not using it. You know, there's times where I could find a bunch of reasons why, in that maybe I don't get to my cup very often, maybe I'm on vacation, but I can use this to feed a separate reservoir.
Maybe it's just super hard to get in there and take this thing off and wiggle it out, and instead I can use this drain port and have it poured over to a container right in the front of the sump where it's just easy to go and dump it out and come back and put it back in. So, you know, consider using that drain port because it can make things a lot easier. All right, so number 11, you can actually move this thing somewhere else if you want to.
Yeah, it's an insider tip here. So if you want to use that reservoir, you don't overlook using this float in that reservoir. So if I didn't have a way to stop the float or tell my skimmer that, hey, my reservoir's full, I might come home to an overflowing skimmate bucket rather than having it shut off. So just move the float and have it shut off from your reservoir.
Yeah, so you can put that in like either just a container that you have, but you can also use the things like Davy Jones locker. Octopus has one.
Yep.
Some of these things actually have carbon on the top so they don't stink. And there's really great options for collecting that skimming and making it easier to remove. So if you do that, consider moving the float switch over there so it'll catch it there, and it actually won't work here at all. So you really should move it. All right, so if you only heard one thing today, let it be this.
Yeah, that for me, it's go against the grain of what everybody else is doing. Think about those recirculating skimmers, because there's like 3 or 4 additional layers of performance tuning that you can get out of it. So if you have the space, think recirculating.
Yeah, one of the things for me here are probably the most important is with DC. Some I just totally overlooked until I understood the results of all the investigates we did on skimmers and air and different ones, is that more air isn't necessarily better. And actually you're matching it to the organics. And so if I have 5 steps here, one of the things I can do is step 1, I got 2 fish. Step 2, I got 4 fish. Step 3, I got 6 fish, or so on. And so you can scale the skimmer's performance right along with having performance when you have a brand new tank all the way to a much more robust tank, making the skimmer a better option to last the entire longevity of the tank. So if you want to learn more about skimmers, you can see some of those investigates right here. But if you want to see all of the Regal line over on BRS, you can see it right here.